And then kind of the last couple things in which, we get into our legacy talk, it really kind of changed the way people view these types of movies in a big way. Of course, with this and Iron Man, it really kind of changed the whole comic movie spectrum and what you thought about it. In 2018, in which the Hollywood Reporter had this little retrospective calling The Dark Knight, saying it's one of the films that taught filmmakers comic book characters are malleable, able to be grounded or fantastic, prestigious or pure blockbuster, dark, gritty, or light, character driven or action packed. And then I think I'm getting into my Ebert note. So, yep, here he is again, not too long after. In 2008, he wrote The Dark Knight, to a lesser degree, Iron Man redefined the possibilities of the comic book movie. And you've had other studios and films trying to replicate this tone, going for the dark and gritty tone, thinking that's the way to go. And I specifically have it in my notes, looking at you, Warner Brothers and DCEU. Gotta take a shot here as soon as it's over for the DCEU.
Oh,
But
I was literally going to say, like, I mean, fundamentally, it changed the approach DC had to its movies. They thought, oh, people want gritty and realistic. It's like, well, yeah, that works for
yeah,
Batman because it's the most sensible, because he's the most grounded of anybody of the DC, of the major ones, of course. But also, like, Nolan was going for a hyper realistic version, as, realistic as you can get. Like, I've never seen documentaries around this time where they're like, oh yeah, the Tumbler can exist in real life. This concept can exist in real life. But it's like, the film obviously has to push it because it's a movie, and sometimes we have to break reality.
right.
But like, I mean, it's funny because 2 years before there's the, I will always argue this, the very underrated Superman Returns, which, works as, a somewhat Christopher Reeve-y movie, even though it's, the direct Christopher Reeve sequel with Brandon Roth, but, it was kind of trying to go for a little more of a serious tone, but, like, nowhere near what The Dark Knight was going to do 2 years later. And, like, I'm 100% convinced after that they were like, and seeing the box office return, because Superman Returns didn't do that well, they were like, that's it. That's it. That's what we're going to do forever now, folks. And it's always going to work.
Yeah, I mean, Raj hit the nail on the head when he put that quote out there about Dark Knight and Iron Man, because looking at it now 15 years later, and you got people questioning if there's fatigue and stuff. You got Marvel putting in all these projects. You now got the DCU getting started with something I think we mentioned we were going to talk about it up at the top, but kind of forgot. Some Superman news, speaking of, but
Oh, it's not gonna be relevant by the time this pod comes out. So
yeah. But looking at the way these two films affected the industry all these years later, it's kind of mind-boggling how much it's changed. Of course, Iron Man changed everything, create a whole cinematic universe, probably the most successful franchise in film history. I mean, our boy Feige's getting the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame because of it. And Dark Knight, it kind of changed the way you think about how these movies can be done. And it doesn't matter, if you try to go the dark, gritty way. That's not the way to go if you want your films to be taken seriously like this one. But like, if you have a good story, compelling story, good characters that are there in your story, and you trust your audience, like, you are going to have a really good movie if you take those things away from The Dark Knight. If you just take away the dark and gritty tone, the aspect of it, then that's all you have. So, like, you got to have those other story elements and character elements, and the way that they shot this film. Of course, Nolan likes to do all the stuff practical.
mm-hmm.
It's just like, again, hardly a film 15 years later really kind of comes close to what this film accomplished in giving us an excellent story, a definitive Batman for a generation. You got one of the best filmmakers out here making a sequel and giving us one of the best performances, not and also one of the best villain performances ever. And Ledger, like it, looking at it now, like it's kind of hard for this film to be touched, but it's really impacted how we view these types of films. And like these films can be something more.
Mhm.
You know, we talk about the concept of, I think, going back to, the Batman, where like at the end he's like, I need to be something more. Well, this film was something more than just the comic book type of film that a lot of people thought it was. It became something more.
I don't know how to say this without coming off as that pretentious guy, but I think it's the only way to say this. Raimi's Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 are wonderful, excellent movies that I love to death and will always love. But, like, they're presented in a more blockbuster movie kind of way. Where, like, they're taking it seriously
Right.
and respecting it, but, like, for the most part, they're saying, like, it's a guy who gets bit by a spider and does spider stuff. Let's calm down here. But Nolan is just like, he's literally looking at this whole mythos as like a thing that is real. And he's like, okay, how do we make it appear real? And Batman Begins laid that groundwork for him to like kind of experiment and like kind of maybe gain a good idea. Because I don't think even with Nolan, I have a love-hate relationship with, especially with his last couple movies. But I'm still looking forward to Oppenheimer, obviously, because Barbie. But like, I don't think there's any version of Nolan. I feel like even he would admit, like, he could have made this as his first go around. Like, there's just
No.
you have to like really play with the idea of like this type of Batman before really going into it. But like once he did that, I was like, okay, I know this can work. And the funniest thing is he's on record like it sounds crazy, especially if Batman Begins ending with hey, we have another guy. Look, he leaves a Joker card around. What can that mean, Batman? He was like, they didn't know what the sequel was going to be. They weren't even committed to Joker. They were just like, I mean, we got to end it somehow. What's the most Batman thing to end it? A Joker card.
Yeah.
But just like how he approaches, like, okay, I can do Batman in this very serious tone. What about a villain? And like, the Joker was the most obvious pick. And the funniest thing is, there's always the controversy of these Batman castings. Back in the day, Keaton, it's the most 80s thing ever. People were writing physical, actual letters to Warner Brothers like, what the hell's wrong with you? Michael Keaton, you jagos. And, I don't think Bale got hate when he was cast in, what, 04, 03? At least not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Like, I know Ledger from the historical side, looking into it, like, people were like, the guy from Brokeback Mountain and Knight's Tale, like, this is a terrible casting decision. But Nolan just, that Batman Begins, its importance is going to be, it laid, obviously the story and sequel groundwork for The Dark Knight, but like, also how that version of Batman could work in a way where someone like Nolan and how he approaches film could, just take it that one step further and make, a film that 15 years later we're just gushing and loving over every day.